So you're thinking about making the move to North Carolina, maybe South Carolina, but for sure you've heard about Waxhaw. And you probably clicked on this link because you want to know a little bit more information about the town of Waxhaw. Well, you've come to the right video. In this one, we are going to go ahead and uncover some of the history of Waxhaw, some of the pros and the cons, so you can make an informed decision when making the move. Now, in addition to that, I'm also going to share a really cool tidbit of information about the types of people that are in Waxhaw and what you could find as some really fun extracurricular activities. So be sure to stay tuned until the end. Now, if you're looking for everything Charlotte, North Carolina and South Carolina, the good, the bad, and everything in between, you've come to the right channel. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay tuned for more info. And if you want to be notified, click that notification button and you'll know every time I drop a video. Now, I truly do get calls, texts, and emails from people just like you moving to the area. So if that's you, whether you're moving across the country, across the world, or across town, whether it's 9 days or 90 days from now, you know the deal. Be sure to text me, call me, email me. All of my information is in the description below. I want to hear from you. Now, enough about that. Let's dive into the meat of this video, which is Waxhaw, North Carolina. Now, where in the world is Waxhaw? Well, Waxhaw is this tiny little town that is on the far southern region underneath Charlotte. Now, if you were to look at it from a latitudinal aspect, it's kind of in line with Rock Hill, South Carolina. The only challenge there, not a huge major road going to it like I-77 does to Rock Hill, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Let me give you a little bit of history when it comes to Waxhaw. Now, Waxhaw was actually the first place that gold was found in the United States, which is pretty freaking cool. Now, I have talked to some people who are more of a self-proclaimed historians, I guess you could say, that claim that Charlotte should not have been named Charlotte. Instead, it should have been named Goldsboro, because the entire region actually sits on large beds of gold. It's one of the largest gold deposits in the United States, and especially the largest on the East Coast. A little bit of fun facts. Now, as for most of the regions, it was once inhabited by the Native Americans. Now, back in 1888, it actually first got its railroad into the area, and that truly helped when it connecting Atlanta to the Charlotte region and allowed Waxhaw to truly prosper. Now, of course, the first settlers that were here came way back when, and most of them were actually German, Scots, Irish, which actually is very similar to Mooresville, which is on the far northern region of Lake Norman. If you've seen that video, I go in a little bit of detail on that as well. Now, one of the coolest things about the area, aside from gold being one of the main products that was coming out of Waxhaw, they also still did have farmland. But it has morphed into something way better now in the, I would say, modern days. Now, modern day Waxhaw, the Waxhaw of today, has fabulous dining, entertainment, but one of the biggest things is also the scenic areas. So it has invested in parks and community centers and things of that nature to truly bring everyone together, because it is not only a place where people live, it's also a destination, especially for those that live in Charlotte that want to get into a little bit of the country. Now, at the very end of this video, I am going to tell you another little known fact about Waxhaw, which goes right into this. So check out the end of this video. Don't skip it. Now, let's dive into some of the pros and cons of Waxhaw, North Carolina. Now, of course, there's always good and bad in any town that you might want to live in. So I want to make sure we uncover a lot of the highlights and give you the opportunity to dig in a little deeper. So one of the biggest things I would say is a pro, or a very positive part of Waxhaw, has to do with the economy. The economy is phenomenal in the Waxhaw area. The unemployment rate in Waxhaw is only 3.7%. Now, this is far below the US average of 6%. In addition to that, jobs actually increased by 2.6% in the last year, which is a lot higher than most of the rest of the country. In addition to that, it's predicted to go up by 44% in the next 10 years. The rest of the US only predicted to go up 33%. Now, in addition to this, while it's not necessarily economy and jobs, it does have to do with finances. The tax rate in Waxhaw is actually lower than the rest of the US. Waxhaw is at 6.8, while the US average sits at 7.3. I'll take that any day. So let's go to one of the cons, cost of living. See, Waxhaw is known as one of the most affluent towns surrounding Charlotte. Now, the great thing with that is, well, there's a lot of positives. Great schools, great homes, but there's also some negatives too. The cost of living is going to be higher. Now, some of that has to do with the income of the people in the area, which also drives the prices and the styles of homes that are in the area, and everything raises above that. But the interesting thing to note, it's not too much higher than the rest of the US, meaning the US average. Now, if the US average were to sit at 100, Waxhaw sits at 106.1. So not terribly higher, but it is still higher, and it's something to take note of. Now, if you are renting in Waxhaw, your average rent for a 3-bedroom house is going to be about $1,900. Meanwhile, the US average sits at about $1,600, so a little bit more expensive. Now, one of the biggest differences you're going to find is the cost of homes. The average in Waxhaw is about $521,000, while the US average is $338,000. So that's about a 54% difference. Now, you will notice that in various areas of Charlotte and the surrounding towns and communities, you are going to have those that have a higher price for homes. And Charlotte itself does not sit at the below average price. It's actually above the US average. So that holds consistent. But if you're looking for a region around Charlotte where you're going to have a little bit more of a cost of living being lower, Waxhaw might not be the option for you. What I can say is what you do get with these costs are phenomenal schools, low tax rates, and some beautiful homes and scenery. I absolutely love driving through Waxhaw, and if it was a little bit closer to town, I might actually live there, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's talk about the actual population in the town of Waxhaw. 97% of people have at least a high school diploma, while 54% of people that live there have at least a 4-year degree. Now, one of the interesting facts about this and about this area is there's actually a fairly high percentage of people that also have a master's or doctorate. Now, I'm not saying everybody that lives there has their master's or doctorate, but what I am saying is this region tends to have a far higher level of education among the population. The other interesting piece about this is when we're looking at the actual average incomes of the people that live in this area, a lot of those individuals do not need higher level of education. That's right. There are a lot of individuals who are in real estate or own other corporations that started from the ground up. When you're looking at an area that you want that American dream where people started from nothing, Waxhaw actually has a lot of those people, and it's been very interesting to meet many of them. I always see education as a positive, but we've got to jump back to the negatives. All right, here's another con of Waxhaw, and that's crime rates. Now, don't get too scared. The crime rates in Waxhaw are actually pretty exceptional, but I put it into the negative column because no crime is good. But let's talk about the crime rates and how they are far more exceptional than any other area really in the Charlotte region. Looking at the violent crime rates in Waxhaw, it's actually only 7.8. Meanwhile, the US average is 22.7. Now, this is on a scale from 1 to 100. So you can see there's very little crime, especially from the violent side. Following up from that, property crime is at 19.1. Meanwhile, the US average, 35.4. I'll take Waxhaw any day. Seeing these numbers, it's easy to see why Waxhaw is considered one of the safest towns in the country, as well as in the Charlotte region. Now, Charlotte is a very safe city, do not get me wrong, but there's always going to be safer areas, and this one is pretty exceptional. Now, I'm going to give you one really cool statistic, one last statistic on crime. Robbery is at 4.4. Are you ready for the rest of the US? The national average is 135.5. That is a glaring difference. Now, that particular statistic is out of 100,000 people. This is an exceptional town to live in, especially if you're looking for a safe environment for you, your family, your loved ones, and your friends. So take a look at Waxhaw. If you want more information, there are links in the description with regards to crime statistics. So another pro, the schools. The schools in Waxhaw have some of the highest ratings in the region. That's right, 9s and above, 9s and above. Now, granted, it's out of a 10 scale, but most of the schools are either a 9 or 10 out of 10, which is really difficult to get to. Now, there are some that are an 8 out of 10, but let's not split hairs. That's a really good rating. Now, part of that has to do with the lower population and also the lower population of the amount of children in the school. Waxhaw spends about $8,000 per student per year if we're looking at the budgeting. But as we also know, just because you spend more money on a student does not necessarily mean they get a better education. I know areas of the country where they're spending many thousands and thousands of dollars per student, and the education is horrible. While, of course, spending more money per student does not necessarily mean you have a better education, and I've seen plenty of areas that spend more money per student and actually get a worse education. One of the biggest pieces is also student to teacher ratio. On average, you're looking at about 16 students per teacher. Heck, I remember when I was in school, we had 30 to 31 kids per class. It is not like that in Waxhaw. They have made sure that each student gets the proper attention, and instead of no child left behind, they make sure all children are pushed forward. So back to a con, and I referenced this earlier, but we're circling back around to it. The one reason why I don't live in Waxhaw myself is because it's so far south. In fact, the commute times are a bear. So when you're looking at average commute times, they could be 45 minutes just to get to downtown Charlotte on a good day. Sometimes it could be longer. The reason for this really has to do with the infrastructure leading into Waxhaw. As I mentioned earlier, Waxhaw is one of the farthest towns outside of Charlotte on the southern side, and there's no main road or interstate that leads to it. In fact, you can get to Rock Hill in about 20 minutes from downtown, whereas on the same, I guess you could say, southern trajectory for Waxhaw, because there isn't a main road that goes to it, it could take you 45 minutes, sometimes longer. Now, the biggest piece of this is as you're headed into Waxhaw, when you get past Marvin, if you're taking a look at a map, it actually goes down to a 2-lane road. This is where your biggest backup comes. You've got lights, intersections, 2 lanes, and a lot of people that are trying to commute, especially during those peak hours in the morning and in the evening after work. Now, if you work off hours or you work from home or you don't need to commute into Charlotte, by all means, you will not even have this issue. But if this is something that you're needing to do on a daily basis, whether it be to downtown Charlotte or the northern side of Charlotte, this might be something you want to consider before making the move. Now, if you're heading into the South Park area, you could get there probably in about 25 minutes, maybe 30 if it's bad traffic. But if you're headed into town, that's the biggest thing, I'll repeat that, that's where your biggest headache is going to be. And that is one of the reasons why a lot of people, although they love Waxhaw, will not make the move there, because they want that quality of life, and if they're sitting in traffic, they're not going to have it. Now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of ways to get into Waxhaw, but the main vein that gets in there is going to be backed up. And, well, even the sideways will probably be a little bit backed up. So keep that into consideration before thinking about making the move, and maybe go ahead and drive it for yourself. It might not be as bad as you think it is. Now back to one of our last positives, and by the way, it's not really the last, it's just the last one I'm putting into this video because you don't want to hear me droning on and on for hours. I love Waxhaw, but here's one of the coolest pieces, especially if you're thinking of buying a home there. One of the other big draws to Waxhaw is because there are larger parcel sizes and they're more affordable. The closer you get into Charlotte, the higher the prices go for the size of home and for the land. Whereby out in Waxhaw, you can get much larger parcels of land for less than you would pay further into town. And if the commute is a bit of a drawback, here's another thing to keep in mind. As this area expands, infrastructure will as well, and these roads will widen as time passes. Now, another thing to bear in mind, the median home price is about $521,000. Now, I know I already mentioned this, but when we're talking about purchasing a home, there are these prices in other areas of Charlotte. The thing to keep in mind, though, is the actual growth of the area and the price of the homes. In fact, over the last 10 years, Waxhaw alone has increased over 120% in the sales price or prices of homes in the area. What this means is that your equity of your home will probably increase at a faster rate than a lot of the other areas around Charlotte. So if you're thinking of staying there a short time and perhaps changing homes or moving to another area, you know that you're going to get your money back out of it. In addition to that, home appreciation is up by about 25%, which is pretty extraordinary. The other thing I want to point out is that the average age of a home in Waxhaw is only 12 years old. So the odds of you getting a newer home, even if you're buying resale, is pretty great. In addition to that, there is a lot of new construction going on, and like I said, most of them are on larger parcels than what you're going to find in the Charlotte area. All in all, you can't go wrong buying a home in Waxhaw. So those are some of the pros and the cons of living in Waxhaw. As you can tell, even the cons aren't that bad. Honestly, the worst part about Waxhaw would be commutes, but like I mentioned, there's gonna be widening of roads at some point in the future, so it's not gonna be a challenge forever, especially if you're not commuting every day. But as promised, there's a little known fact about Waxhaw, and it's that it's actually a haven for those who love horses. The equestrian community in Waxhaw is widespread, and as you're driving through the area, you'll note some beautiful farms. And when I say farms, I mean just equestrian farms, not any kind of cows or pigs or anything like that, just horses. It's absolutely beautiful. I love driving through the area, and if I ever had horses, this would be the place that I would go. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got plenty out of it. I'm going to be putting out more content and video about Waxhaw, so be sure to take a peek. And you know how it goes. Whether it's 9 days or 90 days from now, whether you're moving across the country or across the world, that's right, I've had people from even South Africa and Dubai, be sure to go ahead and give me a call, a text, an email. I want to make your move exactly what you want it to be. All of my information is in the description below. Be sure to like and subscribe and reach out. I want to hear from you. And I want to hear from you about Waxhaw. What questions do you have? Put it in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I look forward to showing you around town.